Live streaming is on.
Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Clinton, you got to mute.
I can't hear.
I know. He's gonna
Thank you.
drop out in a second. Thank you. Okay. Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. It's November 19, 2021. We want to thank Clinton Ignatoff and Concerned Medicine for hosting us today. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Dana Berman Duff. Is that the correct way to pronounce it, Dana?
No, my name is pronounced Dana. My dad wanted a boy. He called me Dan, so it's Dana.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that, Dana.
That's okay.
It's a pleasure and an honor, and we connected through your films being shown at curated at LA Film Forum, and I've seen your films at Experiments in Cinema in New Mexico,
Right.
Brian Konevsky's festival, and I've seen your films through San Francisco Cinematheque, Steve Polta's Crossroads.
Right, just recently.
And I've really been intrigued researching your website, and I think we have a lot in common, and we're ready to go. So
Thank you.
Here's the first question. What's the best thing for a human being?
A human being or a person?
Well, that's what this series is all about is inventing new questions. So you win right off the bat. You answered a question with a question. Just to put it into context, you put all the questions into the context you want.
Okay.
So you can answer it as you will.
I'd have a different question for human being, or a different answer for human beings would be something like food and water. But for people, the Buddhists say that the cause of suffering is the illusion of separation, and I really like to think about that. And so I believe that's true, and as such, that would mean that the best thing for people would be belonging. All the happy people I know are happy in the context of others, and the unhappy people I know usually don't have others, or they're suffering alone. They feel like they're rejected or kicked out or angry. So I'd say belonging is the thing that we really have to be happy anyway.
I like that answer a lot. I don't get that answer very often, and I agree with it 100%. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
That immediately made me think of being asked by the New York Times if I wanted digital delivery or home delivery.
That's good.
Like that the information is a thing that is sent to me. As far as stimulus, and I'm an extremely visual person, but I would have to take the whole schmear. It's got to come in with sight, sound, feeling, language, haptic, optical.
Yeah, it's interesting because you'll get a kick out of these. Norman Klein, I said, what's your favorite form of information? He said, honest.
Honest. He's right.
He flipped it to an adjective. And, one of my favorite, both Craig Baldwin said human touch, and Ann Magnuson said hug.
I have to agree with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, and it's beautiful how the range goes, but I think if I am understanding what you said, I think you're saying direct experience.
On the other hand, I'm going to contradict myself. I'm blissfully happy sitting in a dark theater with a silent film going, like I can watch a James Benning film for an hour and be completely happy. And I think that that's really just through, it's just visual.
Visual, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sensory, You said other senses too, but it's sensory and visual was the first thing. That's very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you think humans, and here's a great thing, I love to be like challenged or uh you know, well, challenge is the best word right now, on the wording of my questions. So, now I'm almost wanting to change human beings to people. I
People.
love it. But the way I usually ask it is, why do humans collect or gather information?
Oh, I would say survival right off the bat. With human beings, it's like we wouldn't have survived if we didn't gather the conditions around us.
And do you think that need or want is more innate or more invented?
Well, I guess the instinct to survival would be pretty innate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do thoughts create emotions?
Oh, yeah. And I think it works both ways.
Yeah.
I really do. Is sometimes I think that I work with this all the time. I talk myself into feeling a certain way about something or not feeling a certain way, usually with a negative response. I can talk my way into looking at it positively. But also, I know that sometimes I just have a feeling come up and I've got to rationalize it. So I invent a story about why I'm feeling uneasy. And you know what I mean? So they trade places, I think, all the time.
Yep. Is thinking more innate or more invented?
Oh, you may have to ask a scientist about that. I don't know if what I think about it is even very relevant or important.
Well, it is important to me in that I'm after your hunch or your guess. So some of my questions early on are that you could consider them, well, that's a neuroscientist question or whatever. But I'm just saying, your guess.
So is thinking innate or
invented?
Yeah. I think. I really believe that thinking takes place on so many different levels and in so many different modes. So I don't know if I'd be able to parse it out, but probably some of it has been studied and learned to think, but then some of it is just creature, again, kind of survival. Oh, I just kind of lost my train of thought, but
that's all right. It will come back around, I'm sure. Yeah. Can humans think without language?
Well, I'm thinking of my cat, who I can watch thinking. I know he's thinking. He's thinking about like how we can get the bowl away from his sister. But I don't think he's doing it with language. Or maybe he's not. Maybe he's meowing in his head. I'm not so sure. But again, a linguist could answer this question better. But I do remember that a linguist, Noam Chomsky, said that language is just one aspect of cognition. And I tend to agree with that. Again, it's just like that's just part of language is part of the way we think. In a related way, I remember learning years ago about, the name of this theory, I think it was called Sapir-Whorf or Wolf.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah, and this was important to me at the time, that language, if not determined, but at least influenced to a great degree how we see the world. And that made sense to me in thinking about how mechanical and precise English is, and non-gendered. When learning French and Spanish, there's not as many words in French as there is in English, so there's more room for poetry. I think Arabic is always considered a very, very poetic language. So it seems to me that people who learn those languages as babies and coming up, that seems likely that they would have a more poetic bent, or English speakers would have a more kind of mechanical, precise bent. Something I think a lot about in learning French and in the Romance language is how it affects people to learn a gendered language. Like, sorry, there's a little fly here. How it would affects a person to learn that every object in the world is masculine or feminine. That kind of scares me, actually. I really appreciate English for not having a gender basis.
Yeah. Well, two really quick observations. You have ESP because the next question after this one is concerning Chomsky. And that same fly that was flying around you just fly by me.
Maybe it was your fly.
I know. I mean, it might have
reacting to your fly.
Yeah. So, fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
feel it.
Yeah.
It really comes from my gut.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Yeah.
And then, Duhamel, he's quoted by Walter Benjamin in 1935. I can no longer think what I want to think. My thoughts have been replaced by moving images.
Yeah.
So I love that one. He sort of trumps the other ones.
Yeah.
But
I know what that feels like. I agree because I write every day, and I write in a way that's most exciting to me, and that indeed I don't know what I'm going to write. I'm not thinking. It's just it might as well be coming out of my fingers. Yeah. And it's always very surprising. I don't know whose voice it is. Like, who said that? Like, there's characters in the head that I don't know, and they just come out when I'm typing. Yeah.
So Chomsky said a language is not just words. It's culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work, when it breaks down?
Oh, I don't know. I guess it depends on the circumstance. I draw a lot. I do. I draw pictures. I do. I think drawing was my first language, actually. Yeah, there was so much turmoil in my house, and I parked in front of the TV with my drawing pad. But so I trust pictures more than I do words.
That's good. Your observations of people in general, I know it's both and it depends. Are people more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
I think people are actually largely feeling beings. They just think that they're thinking beings. And the example I have, and this is not people per se, is the stock market. Like, it seems like the stock market is a rational system that things should make sense, and it can be organized, and right. But the stock market runs totally on feeling, right? It goes up and down just depending on how people are feeling. And when I first learned that about the stock market, it horrified me because a lot depends on it. And it's just like, if people are scared or they're happy, or they read something, or they ate a really good lunch, and they buy a lot of stocks. I don't know. So that led me to believe that almost everything really operates on feeling, and then we just rationalize it after the fact to make it make sense.
Yeah, two quick observations you evoked in me was Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. I always go, good luck. you want to surrender to that, but it's like, and the other one was Abby Hoffman. Just visualize him at the New York Stock Exchange throwing dollar bills. And these guys are like,
Yeah.
It's only $1,
Yeah. But they're money guys,
Yeah.
And they're not thinking, they're reacting absolutely from feeling, instinctively.
So, two Alan Turing questions from 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
my gut reaction to that automatically, I heard in my head, is like, no, they don't really have much to do with each other. I think thinking is a tool, actually, and it's not, don't get me wrong, I love thinking. I think thinking is actually has a really sensual quality. Like, my favorite thing to do in the world, I was asked once years ago, is like what I really love to do in the world most. And I said, I just like to talk about ideas. And then I realized, because I was a teacher for 30 some years, it's like, at that time I was a college professor, and I was like, oh my God, they pay me to do that all day long. It's like the best ever. So I love thinking. I believe thinking has a feeling quality. So, and now I've forgotten the question.
No,
I went off.
You went off good, and I was like, welcome to my interview. That's the most fun thing in the world for me, is to talk to people about ideas. So it was, is thinking a function of the soul? But yeah,
I can't make a relationship.
Yeah, you answered it. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Again, my first gut answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
And it's for this reason that I came up as a sculptor, and I'm very material oriented. And hence my relationship to film. Film is a really material experience, right? But I also have an experience working with a lot of materials, and they very much have personalities. Like, you kind of have to ask a 2x4 if it's willing to be nailed into a bottom plate, will you stay here? I mean, you really have to have a respect to your materials. Now, if that translates to machines, yeah, I think it does. I'm very interested in new theories called speculative realism. There's a book called Vibrant Matter by Jane Bennett is her name, that I was really interested in. And they're largely taking humans down from the dominant position and giving agency to materials. And I think that includes machines. We talk to machines like they have personality, right? We have very personal relationships with our machines. We really do.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, my wife, she talks to her cell phone, and she would talk to, you talk, oh, please, car, start.
Car, yeah.
We talk to our cars, everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Oh boy, that's a good one, because I maybe have this illusion that meaning procures happiness. I think I've kind of changed my tune. As I get older, I'm more interested in happiness and less interested in being right, let's say. Though we do believe that like life is supposed to have meaning, and I don't really believe that anymore. I think the purpose of life is to live. It doesn't have to have meaning, which I think is really something that humans have added on, let's say. But so I'm giving up meaning for being.
That's well put. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're sort of detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
I'm going back and forth.
Yeah.
It seems to me, I want to say, my impulse is to say that, no, I just keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
It could be either, really. I think that there is we come to consciousness, and then the brain starts embellishing consciousness. So it works for me that I imagine it would work that way. Is I have the dawning of consciousness, and then I get more information that shapes the consciousness.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you, give me another word for embellish, and you said it, shape.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I don't know.
What's your hunch?
My thought is pretty slow. Definitely the speed of light is faster than the speed of my thought.
Okay, Audre Lorde said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Awareness.
Wow.
Really? I mean,
that's so good.
I think that's what Rainer is talking about, and she's talking from an era that I came up in, and that was really during like postmodernism and structuralism in filmmaking, where we exposed the apparatus of the making of the image. We didn't just swallow the image anymore. We said this is how this thing is constructed, and it's artificial and it's cultural, and it will indoctrinate you by manipulating your emotions if you're not aware of it, right? Yeah.
Beautiful. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Global disaster. Climate disaster. Yeah. I worry about it constantly.
Wow.
Yeah. I have to work on that. I worry about the Republicans constantly too.
Yeah.
They're really getting to me. Yeah. Don't you?
Oh, I worry. Well, the thing about worry with me is my mom was, like everybody said, she worries too much. So at her memorial service, I got up there and I says, everybody in this room worries that Dolores worried too much.
Yes.
So I think there's a fine line between worry and concern.
Yeah.
And I think, worry takes this demonized, like it's bad to worry. But I think how can you separate worry from concern? Well, you don't want to obsess with it. So, I mean, I try to be positive and not, it's a stupid question, but I love it because it was Earl Morris asked one of those evil politicians he interviewed on one of his feature films. Rumsfeld, he goes, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night? I goes, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And then actually someone said I should change it to think. What do you think about when you go to bed at night? Then it would go with my other thinking questions. And then most people said, no, leave it worry.
Yeah, I think worry is good because we all understand the experience of it, and we all can suffer from it. And it's something I've had to work on a lot. I think I was born worried. I was like a nervous, worried little child. And that's something that I do a lot of things to relieve myself of, like meditation, etc. And I am working on, asking the question, can I do anything about it? It's like,
yeah,
can I do anything about it? And if I can't, I have to let it go. Otherwise, it makes me sick, right? Yeah.
But I think back to your word awareness. Like, we're from a generation where we weren't fed Adderall because we were fidgety and worrying and busy. It was like, here, just take drugs and calm down. They're like, just let us bang against the walls.
Right.
So McLuhan learned from that. Say it again.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, when banging off the wall was just being a kid instead of pathologized as some kind of syndrome, right?
Right. So McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, a poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we don't know what Zooms have done to us. We've embraced it and they work good, but there's things that's shaping our behavior we're not so aware of. Spoken word, printed word, 16 millimeter film, all this stuff has changed us. And we know the intention of the invention, but there's they call it unintended consequences sometimes. I call it the hidden psychic effects. And Pound says, well, if we look to the artists, they broadcast them to us and we can learn to cope with what we don't like about them. And McLuhan's, one of his main probes was, why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
What's your question? Why do we ignore?
Why do people ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
I can't speak for other people. I'm an artist, so.
But I mean, for you, what do you think?
Why other people are ignoring?
Yeah,
I don't know if they are.
yeah,
I do believe in a way, the description of I guess it was Pound's description of the artist being the antenna. I used to tell my my art students, especially in the early years, that being an artist was both the most exciting but also the most demanding job in the world, because we had to be the conscience of the culture.
yeah.
And I think of it in those terms much more. Again, in terms of awareness, is that, and maybe what that's meant by the antenna is that we need to be awake so that we can critique it, describe it, run scenarios of it, write books or whatever, invent ways to see what's happening to us. But I don't know why people listen to it or not.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Do you think, or do you feel artists have a moral obligation?
I think a moral obligation to what?
Yeah, that's a good question.
To do something? To what?
Well, a moral obligation to themselves, to society in general, or just in general. Any moral obligations? Do artists have moral obligations?
I think all citizens have a moral obligation to uphold, I guess, their part of the common weal, to participate with each other, to uphold. I don't think it's a particularly necessarily an art responsibility. It's all the citizen, and I also think moral. I guess I could say people, not just citizens. I'm thinking of it as a political setting, but we have a moral obligation to help each other survive.
Yeah.
And maybe to help each other be happy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's a new question I just added. And most of the people I asked have said everyone has a moral obligation.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, subversive artists like Pasolini or even Mike Kelly or whoever, they make this art and it's almost like the opposite of feeling like they have a moral compass or they're doing something so transgressive. It's like, it's like icky sometimes. So, I think, there's a lot to explain there, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. And I think that transgression itself becomes their tool to shake people up into consciousness. So it may feel really unpleasant, but that transgression is like a necessity to wake people up, to be awakened, is to be really uncomfortable. And another things I always tell my students is that the difference between entertainment and art is that entertainment soothes people, comforts people, and art's job is to cause a disturbance.
Yeah.
It's to make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, believe me, my mantra comes from Louis Buñuel. If I didn't fuck your shit up, I failed. But it's my thing about great art is if it fucks your shit up and makes you go, I could do that, then it's great art.
Okay.
But I liked you brought up this saying, this aphorism, and I would love for you to talk about it in the regards of what we're talking about. My expertise is in knowing not to be an expert.
Oh, did I say that? No, I didn't say that.
No, you didn't say it. Paulo, a Brazilian man, I forgot who said it. Paulo Ferreira, somebody like that.
Oh,
who is it?
He taught something called liberation. It was a new teaching method. Paulo
Solero. No.
De Solero, I don't know, but Freire you're talking about.
Okay, Paulo Freire. Okay, so he's
thought that
Brazilian.
he thought people could. He believed, and he did experiments, and it was groundbreaking that people could educate each other. That it wasn't just coming from the master to the blank slates, but that actually the regular folks had a lot to teach each other and to teach the master.
Yeah.
It was trying to remember what it was called. Liberation. It was kind of liberation, not theology, but liberation pedagogy.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that, because I think in pursuing intellectualism and talking ideas, that sometimes we want to almost backpedal and not know. We want to unlearn, because we're so caught up in learning that sometimes you don't see the big picture. It's hard to see the big picture. So I appreciated you bringing that quote up. And are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Oh, old ideas.
Yeah.
I really definitely. I think I spent a good deal of time trying to root out the old ideas that root out my indoctrination that keep me from seeing things. And I have a lot of bad old ideas. I want to be free of. Yeah.
Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Oh, yeah, I think I remember waving out a car window at my house, and I think there are people on the sidewalk waving back as we drove away from our house in a small town in Wisconsin and drove toward the new house in suburban Minnesota. And I was probably, I guess I was like 4.5. And, they say memory is born in trauma. It's like the way we remember things is because there's not, and I don't mean trauma like being beaten, but that it has an emotional content, right? That's how we remember things. So that's I think my first memory, because it was an emotional moment.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
That's also a really interesting question. I thought immediately of my friend Sissy Boyd, who was a brilliant dancer. She danced with Martha Graham, and then she became a poet and a playwright. Really brilliant in both ways. Though she continued to perform and dance and certain things. And she started having dementia and cognitive difficulties. And we were going to do a project together. I made a film of her saying this actually as we were starting. She said that losing her memory was liberating. And I was shocked. She said, yeah, I feel my writing is much freer because I'm not constantly straining to remember something. And that so the idea of just that term, liberated from memory, she was liberated from her memory. So we were going to do a project in which a live theater project, she's the performer, I was going to, with a film of mine, and I was going to try to create the conditions where the audience would actually would have the experience of forgetting within the performance. But unfortunately, of course, I didn't get to the point where I could actually make that happen. And unfortunately, her memory got worse and worse, and so she couldn't perform anymore because she couldn't remember why she was there. And it was humiliating for her to suddenly be somewhere and not know why. It was just so humiliating. So I don't know if she'd feel the same way about memory now. She doesn't remember. She's now in an assisted living place not far from here, so I visit her. And I know she won't remember if I visited or not. I just believe that she feels she has a felt memory. I have to believe that she knows that someone who loves her was around, and maybe not the details of that. I don't know if that answers your question. But
no, that was fine. That was beautiful, actually. Tell me a role model, someone who had an impact on you within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family, just briefly.
Okay.
And what was that specific impact?
Well, my immediate family is pretty small, so I would have to say my mother, because she really brought art to me, and art and literature. She had, this is funny, she had a copy of James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time was always in the basket in the bathroom next to the Reader's Digest, right? But she also had a group that would come over, a writing group, and she took lessons in oil painting, and then eventually turned over all her paints and all her supplies to me once I started making art. She got me to do, we'd always sit down and color. I got the big sets of colors and really elaborate coloring books. And then she constantly supported my interest in art and my working in art.
Well, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you or was a role model.
Oh my God, Jerry, that's tough because there's so many.
Well, just pick one. It can be early or not early. Yeah.
I don't know if I could pick a particular person. I was thinking that growing up in the 60s, there was so much happening that I was, early on, I was just like a little radical. I couldn't get enough of what was happening around me. And I was in suburban Minnesota, and it was the 60s, so that it wasn't like there was all that much information. But I got a subscription to Time magazine when I was about 10. Not Time, Life magazine. Remember that had all the pictures. So I could see what was going on in Haight-Ashbury. And, maybe it was my social studies teacher in 8th grade, because I constantly wrote reports about what was going on culturally. I learned about Buddhism that way. Definitely hippies, definitely civil rights, definitely whatever was going on. The student protests. I was so frustrated because I wanted to be in them, and I was too young to go on the street. But
well, that's amazing because we have a lot of similarities. I've been a magazine freak my whole life, and when I saw the hippies in Life magazine, I goes, wow, and it led me to being an anti-war protester, and so that you answered that well. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
They kind of tried in a cursory way. They were Minnesota Lutherans, and they did have a church, but my mother would take us and my father wouldn't go. And then partly as a result of Life magazine, I decided I wanted to be a Buddhist. And my parents, I don't know when this was, 8th grade, my parents said that I had to be confirmed and then I could do whatever I wanted. So I went to confirmation. I don't know how old you are in that. I think it's 13. It's like bar mitzvah age. And I told the minister that I was a Buddhist, and he said, "Oh, it's okay, just go." Nobody cared.
Right.
Nobody cared.
Do you pray?
Actually, I do. I'm a Buddhist atheist, I guess you could say. I pray all day long, but I don't pray to a deity. I pray. I say the Serenity Prayer all day long. And the reason I say it is its function is purely for this, is so that I'm not the deity. So I don't think that I'm running things. So I don't think I'm in control. I have to ask constantly to accept what's happening and to fight for what I think things need to be. And then just the wisdom to know the difference. It's really a humility prayer, to to remind me that I'm not the one that's running it.
I like that.
It's just too much pressure to run the world.
I've never heard that. I really respect that a lot. I really resonate with it. If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Well, it's a stretch because I don't think God exists, but after I die, I can think of after I die.
Yeah.
Maybe just welcome.
Good. That's funny.
Welcome.
No one's ever suggested before you die you can talk to them. That's pretty good. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I don't think evil exists in this Western sense, that there's darkness and lightness. Or actually even, Jung talked about this a lot, that the balance, certainly in Asian religions, the balance of our darkness and lightness. And, part of the sanity of Jung's theories was that when we can come to terms with the fact that I guess I could put it this way, when we come to terms with the fact that we have evil and all of us are evil and all of us are good is truly mental health.
Yeah.
Right?
How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? This is what I'm going to set up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So
he's like
the basic question.
He's like an oyster that makes a pearl, right?
Right. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to the Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I tend to align with Alan Watts more. I think I usually, if I feel I have an enemy, I say they are my teacher. Like, what can I learn from them? But also, I often resort to the Buddhist story where Mara, the demons that attack him just before he attains enlightenment, and his attendant warned him that Mara was coming, and that he better, we have to do something, get rid of him, whatever, prepare for Mara. And the Buddha said, let him come, invite him to tea. And the saying, the sort of shorthand of that is that I say, I see you, Mara, come have tea with me, right? So a lot with Alan Watts, it's like, I don't acknowledge that they're my enemy at all, that something's gone haywire in our communication. And actually, so then I have to look at how I'm making them my enemy. And how can I diffuse that idea that they're my enemy and make them, it's just a function of fear. We hate people because they scare us or because we're afraid of losing something, right? So rather than addressing the person who I think I'm being threatened by, I have to address my own fear. And that's how I have tea with Mara, is by looking at where the fear is in me. That may be a bad answer for someone who's facing a gun, but these are not, these are for the situations that I find myself in. It's not productive for me to think of anybody as my enemy.
No, you really nailed it too, because the American Indians, indigenous cultures say your enemy is your best teacher.
Yeah.
So you actually said that. That was beautiful. James Joyce was the first projectionist, or he ran the first cinema in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, William Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, one thing I would ask Joyce is whether or not he ever wrote a description of a tree. Like, yeah. Why do you have to write a description of a tree? Like, If he was a filmmaker, he'd have a different story.
See, you're listening. Hold on. You're listening close. Most people just go along with my quotes. And I love the person who really psychoanalyzes it. P. Adam Sidney, the great, he said,
the writer on film.
Joyce never did that. And I goes, well, I'll add allegedly then.
Allegedly. Right. Yeah, because I think both he and I can't imagine that Joyce wouldn't enjoy a movie. Of course he would, right?
Oh, he enjoyed movies. I mean, it's not to bust. It's just to make me sound like I know what I'm talking about. But it's basically, the question is why do we have to recreate things in order to get them?
I don't think I don't think we have to.
Yeah.
I often marvel at, and a lot of my work is about simply representation. And I still, at the very basic level, marvel at the fact that we represent ourselves, we represent things partly we do it because we have imaginations, and we can imagine things working out in more pleasing ways or more troubling ways. And I also think that, and I'm not, I guess I'm just really kind of talking about narrative cinema at this point, but we really enjoy, I do anyway, is taking our emotions out for a drive. Like, let's see what it feels like to, like to be under threat of murder. Or, it's like people like riding on roller coasters because it simulates death. It simulates the threat of death. That makes us, it gets our blood moving. It makes us feel more alive. And I think I don't, and again, this is narrative cinema. I think the kind of films I make, I'm more interested in not representing reality or something that's outside the tree inside or the tree outside. I'm kind of with Brackage and Kubelka here.
Yeah.
That I want the experience of watching my films to be not represent experience, but to be experience.
Yeah.
And that the film is actually created in the watching of it. And that's why it's really hard for some of us who love cinema in the theater, and especially with films that kind of need to be seen on the big screen. I imagine sitting in the dark room with the other bodies. I'm not sure how my work is being transmitted when it comes through your computer, your laptop. Kubelka said he refused to have his work seen on a piece of furniture. And by that he meant a computer screen.
Yeah. Or
a TV screen. He didn't want it on a TV screen. I don't think we had laptops when he said that.
Yeah.
But as a teacher of film, that made life really difficult for me. I couldn't teach Kubelka for a long, long time because he wouldn't allow his films to be digitized.
Yeah.
And I have discovered that they're getting through just fine on your little laptop. Oh. You can see the film grain fine on your little laptop.
Oh yeah, I mean I've sat through Ann Arbor Film Festival is 60 years old. I've gone to 30 years practically. And for 2 years I've watched it on my laptop in my garden, on my bed at home. And Crossroads this year really hit me watching it on my laptop close like this. So I know we know the difference. So a lot of people don't know the difference. They see it, so I totally understand what you're talking about. But you really resonated with James Joyce in what Beckett said about Finnegan's Wake. He says it's not about a dream, it is a dream.
It's a dream.
So when you read it out loud with a group of people, it's a living organism.
Yeah.
So that was good. So what first attracted you? You're growing up and you're drawing, and then you go into sculpture. So I mean, it's sort of like twofold question. What first attracted you to doing sculpture and then doing experimental film? So, like you saw something, I can do that, or like, what was your kickover point from just pursuing art? It sounds like your parents took you to art museums, they exposed you to art, where you says, I can do that, meaning sculptor, and then I can do that, meaning experimental film.
I think you're right. It's like really a matter of exposure. So I picked up the tools that were in front of me. And I don't remember, my dad built things and I wanted to build things. So he taught me carpentry. And then I found this like little block that I could carve, whittling and, starting to carve figures and that kind of thing. But then, as far as film goes, I was lucky enough to go to a high school that had a really, really good theater program. We did Beckett, we did Sartre, but it also had really intense skills in art. And one of those this was really more of a literature class, was a filmmaking, a Super 8 filmmaking class. And then I took a film. There was a program in the St. Paul Science Center, had a program called Film in the Cities, which was also Super 8. And it was suburban Minnesota, so I didn't get to see a lot of movies. There weren't many theaters around. It was, and our TV didn't work most of the time. But there was an experience I had. I was really, really young at this point, and my parents took us to the drive-in theater to see Lawrence of Arabia. I was absolutely transfixed. It was this huge sweeping thing across the drive-in theater, right? And then the fog rolled in, and it got foggier and foggier. And finally, we had to leave before the end of the movie, and it haunted me for years. So I guess at that point, I felt like I had to make film in order to finish Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, that is a great, that's like some experimental filmmakers shooting smoke up in, and then they project on the smoke instead of the screen.
Right.
So, screenwriting teacher told me great art or great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great film or great art is when you clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
Oh my goodness, that's a really interesting. I could be on either side of those camps, depending on the piece. Honestly, I love the experience of being surprised. Kind of like we were talking about, or what I was telling you about, is like writing and not knowing what I'm writing. It's a balancing act with intention. I usually, in certain parts of the process, I have no idea what I'm doing. And then in the background will be a guide that's noticing what's going on. And that will become that, I don't know if I can call it a guide exactly, but the attentive brain, I guess, is following and is starting to discern the intention, and then it will make the intention more apparent. And then I can start adding things that are more intentional. But then going back and forth, it depends on what part of the process. In the editing process, I just finished editing a piece, and I had a lot of parts, and I didn't really know where it was going to go until I started putting the parts together. And when you're editing film, there's what I always watch for is the hit. It's like, you know what I mean? You can't plan a hit. You can't plan when one shot butts up against another, and then you're watching along that timeline, and when the two hit each other, there's a hit, like bam. If you did it a few frames earlier or a few frames later, it's like whatever, it's just a transition. But there's that moment where it just goes. So that, I feel like I can't plan that. I just have to I have to watch for it. Really, when I'm making, I'm just like, it's like one of my teachers, major teacher John Baldessari, described conceptual art this way. He said it's just the process of, and he used his finger. It's like, it's just pointing. That's conceptual art. It's just pointing. So in a similar way, he also said, meaning. This is a great quote from John Baldessari. Meaning is the easiest thing in the world to make. You just put one thing next to another. And that I know is absolutely true from all the work I make, but especially when I'm editing, is I put one thing next to another and then I watch it create meaning. Bam. You know.
Boy, you created meaning there. It was just like bang, bang, bang. You hit the hit. So first of all, Baldessari was basically, I know he was huge into Duchamp, and Duchamp said, the artist of the future will only have to point.
That's what he did.
And that's what he just like, I know how to.
Absolutely.
And then Duchamp says there's no art without an audience. How much do you think of your audience when you're making your film?
Again, that goes back and forth, but when I'm happiest and deep in it, I don't think of audience at all. I am the audience. Yeah. You know, it's me. Yeah. And then if I want to become increasingly miserable, I'll start thinking about what other people are going to do.
Wait, you're implying when you want to become miserable, but you don't want to become miserable.
No.
But it might be a natural human thing to like, you know, because the experimental film world is so small in a way. And it's like, I hate scratching the surface because of personalities, you know, and I know all these people so well, and I'll go, you know, and it's like, it's just living and getting along with other people.
Well, fortunately, it's so small that it's pretty friendly.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of making, well, I guess my experience in the art world too is that in the small enough circles, it's friendly, but it's not, it's like the critic isn't real. It's not like, you know, when I start thinking of audience, I'm not thinking of actual people. Yeah. I'm thinking of the fear of judgment, right?
The fear of judgment. I like
unfortunately, there's such a difference for me in making, you know, drawing or sculpture for an audience that you know, when I know it's working and I know it's good, I know it. But I never know it with film, because with time-based media, once you see it, it's over for you. You can't be innocent again. So, you know, sadly, or maybe blessedly, I have to depend on other people to tell me if it's working, because they're like a new audience constantly, because they're seeing it for the first time. I can never see it for the first time again. Yeah. So I can never know that without. So my poor husband just. He sees my work so many times. He puts up with it, and then I have to hit up all my friends, new ones, to get that, you know, that first take feeling. Yeah. It's really I think it's such a difficulty for us making time-based media that we never really get to see our work.
Yeah. Peter Greenaway said cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. Are experimental filmmakers telling a story a different way or doing something completely different? I know it's both. Again, a stupid question, but it's like Tony Conrad's Flicker is not narrative storytelling per se. We could both watch it right now and we could have a story go through our head. But and I don't think Greenaway's dissing storytelling, but it's funny that the medium's 130 years old approximately. In 120 years of it has really been filming plays. That's all it is. That's the history of cinema.
Yeah.
And so that's why, I mean, I love experimental filmmakers, because what are they doing? Are they telling stories a different way, or are they doing something different?
Nah, I'm totally fed up with storytelling. I hate. I love watching movies. Yeah. But I just hate this idea that we're supposed to be telling stories. It really, I worked a lot in public practice, and I was teaching in that program. And that was a big thing too in public practice, that people had to tell their stories. And I'm just like, I'm fed up with the storytelling. I'll return to what I said earlier about the experience, like the films I make, I want to make the experience kind of with the viewer. It's like it takes place in the viewing. It's not a story I'm trying to tell separate from the viewing. And I have made films that are stories, but for the most part, I feel oppressed by this whole storytelling thing. Yeah. Maybe, you know, an answer to an earlier question is somebody who maybe not a role model, but who really shook my world up was the first time I saw a Stan Brakhage film.
Yeah.
I was like liberated from narrative.
Yeah.
Like he said, I didn't have to tell stories, and that was like fantastic.
Yeah. No, that was good. I appreciate it. And if me and you are starting the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago, you want to make it more inclusive or exclusive? Now, I'm going to set it up. I talked to Chick Strand. She was starting Canyon Cinema the same time in San Francisco. She said, we're trying to recreate our 11-cent moving-going experience. So we'd show a newsreel, a cartoon, and then an experimental film. Brakhage came along and said, no, don't show that other stuff. Just show experimental films. And so, you know, what would you say, you know, we want to be exclusive, or do we want to be inclusive so people will develop, like you'll see Betty Boop Hitchcock in the experimental film and you'll see it in the big picture, or do you want to marginalize it, you know, inclusive or exclusive?
Oh, well, exclusive, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I think, I mean, the subtext in this is that which is unpopular. The subtext is, it's like, right now we want to be really inclusive, include everybody, include it.
Yeah.
But I think that's a red herring, honestly. I think that the idea is that for a particular audience, I want to make films for a particular audience that's interested in my films. A long time ago came to terms with the fact that may be 12 people.
Yeah.
I have no expectation that I'm going to play to a crowd of 1,000, or, you know, that I'm going to make $1 million at this. It's like, I'm happy to make my little films for a little audience.
Yeah. It's like Phil Solomon told me, I'm a professional experimental filmmaker.
Yeah.
You know, because he
more exclusive.
Yeah, he teaches, and he got shown at Sundance once. But here's the real follow-up question: what are the services and disservices of ghettoizing or marginalizing experimental film? And Jackson Pollock was on the cover of Life magazine in '49. Regular folks could start developing an aesthetic for experimental painting. There was no Bruce Conner or Maya Deren on Life magazine covers. Generally, it's privileged, entitled, I call them rich art kids, who develop an avant-garde aesthetic and dominate the experimental film world. Any comment?
Sure. Well, you know, right away I have to question the question.
Yeah.
Is by ghettoizing, I think that you mean that it doesn't have, like a ghetto, it doesn't have the support, it doesn't have a large base of support. I think that also kind of the subtext of the question is like ideas of success. And I have questions about ideas of success and failure. It's like, why not? What's so bad about marginalizing?
Yeah.
Why is being marginalized, I'm not going to use the word ghettoized, but marginalized, why is that a bad thing? Because when we talk about success in terms of film, the epitome is always the Hollywood blockbuster.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on that continuum, right?
Yeah.
So if it's and then to return to your comment about the rich art kids, having been a art teacher for many, many years, the product, again, I think, is product of our culture and the lack of support for art education, from the beginning. And if we wanted bigger audiences, we might spend the money to educate children into art and aesthetics. That just the opposite is happening. Unfortunately, a lot of I taught in a school, fortunately, that had a huge block. Actually, the majority of the kids were low income, and that was part of our kind of mission, in a way, Otis College of Art and Design. They had just as much capacity to appreciate the more obscure kinds of art forms as the highly educated rich kids, I guess, that had formalized art education. They just had no access to it. And also culturally, we elect somebody like Donald Trump who can't even read a book. You know what I mean? It's like, where's our support coming from?
Yeah. No, you tackled that well, and you really enlightened me, because I should drop the word ghettoize and just use the word marginalize. And you enlightened me totally by saying marginalizing is not such a bad thing. So that was really good. Michael Apted told me 40 years ago, I asked him, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know rapid montage started in 1922 with Abel Gance, but it flourished 40 years ago with MTV. And Michael said, because we've learned to take in information faster. And Marty even said, I'm cutting my films faster because of MTV. The question I ask is, can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
You know, I have no idea. I think that we do. I honestly do. I think, but the net result is, first, I'll just tell you, I had this direct experience when I was teaching a video class a number of years ago, and I showed them a Polanski film, and they were bored as could be. They were just like, they couldn't even stay awake. And to me, I mean, it was repulsion. It's like, and I realized that they were bored because the editing was so slow, and I could see it myself, because the years that I'd shown it, and it wasn't boring, and then after MTV, it became boring. But whether or not we can actually take it in, we feel like we can. But you may have noticed lately, I have the experience now, is that I feel like I'm constantly distracted. I think the whole culture is exhausted because we can't keep our attention on anything, and we're constantly interrupted. I have received like 12 text messages while we were talking from, and not people I know necessarily.
No, it's totally.
I think you might consider asking the question: what happened after cell phones? Not just after MTV, but now what's happened after cell phones? Yeah.
Well, the industry standard, according to my professional friend in the music industry in New York, is 10 seconds. If you get any audio clip, and everybody goes, "That's horrible," I goes, "Give me a break." Mine is like 1 or 2 seconds. In 1 or 2 seconds, I'm like, do I really want to spend any more time with this? I know it's not fair, but really the hidden question of this question is it literally possible to multitask?
I think the science of that is no, as far as what I've heard lately anyway. I'm not the authority on this, but that we really can't do two things at the same time. On the other hand, I can do two things really quickly in succession. And I feel like it's like, years ago, I wanted to edit, before Final Cut Pro came in, I was going to try to do this in video. I wanted to take two films and blend them together. In other words, I was responding to is a recut. I wanted to do a mashup kind of recut, but I wanted to do every other frame of two films and to see if we could understand it. I never succeeded in that. What largely was the problem was strobing effects. They have to be exactly the same tonality. But my thesis was that indeed we could take in two films simultaneously. I should probably go back to that and see if I could do it. That we could understand two narratives simultaneously. I think that we can, but again, it's really more like going back and forth. We're not thinking of two things at the same time, we're going back and forth. Also, I'm feeling these days anyway, I think it's really unhealthy for our brains, all of this. It's stressing us out.
What was the motive of the cave artist? Not what Herzog says or what anthropologists or you can agree, but I mean, what's your hunch? The motive of the cave artist?
Well, there's two different kinds of cave art. I'm thinking of the handprints where they blew, ochre dust, the red dust on the handprint. And the handprints, to me, are the same as tagging in my neighborhood. It's just I was here, like a young guy wants to say his name. I was here. I existed.
Yeah.
But the drawings, I relate to the drawings of animals and hunting very much as a drawer. To me, drawing is a way of thinking.
Nice.
And I see those, and I think they were either, I don't know if they're communicating with each other, but I think they were figuring things out. Like if the bison is here and I'm over here, I can, they're figuring out how to hunt.
Yeah.
Not just recording it, but actually figuring it out.
Beautiful. McLuhan loves his saying, the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can.
Nice.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Well, Jerry, again, I'm going to say it depends on what you're talking about. Because we tend to valorize conviction, right? We love conviction and dedication and determination, and unfortunately, and also no compromise. But look what it's done to our government. You can't govern without compromise. You can't have a relationship without compromise.
Yeah.
You can't be with other humans without compromise. And I'm afraid it's gotten a bad name lately, and that's really unfortunate.
Another word you brought up in one of the interviews I saw on YouTube with you, very articulate, was bravery. And I was like, is bravery more innate or more invented by humans?
Oh my God, I don't know. I think just from babies and animals, I think that there are a lot of personality. I mean, I think babies are born with a lot of personality. My sister and I had entirely different personalities when we were born. And I think bravery is one of those characteristics that is born. At the same time, I think bravery can be cultivated.
Yeah.
I really do. I had a yoga teacher one time, and I've never forgotten this. I use this in all sorts of things now. We were doing, this is actually one of my films, the one about my sister, and you may have heard this, where, Virdhavadasana 2 is where you're kind of on one knee, and you've got both arms out, and it's hard. It's really hard. It's actually like this one.
Yeah.
And you've got like one knee's bent and one is extended behind you, or one leg's extended behind you, and your leg starts to shake because you can't keep that up for very long. And I was failing. It's like, oh shit, this is too hard. I can't do it. And the teacher said, be brave. And all of a sudden, I was like a post. You couldn't have moved me until she told us to move. It's just those two words, like, gave me all the strength that I needed. And I've never forgotten that. So once in a while, when I'm feeling like things are failing, I have to say to myself, be brave. Just hold on. It was
beautiful. When I heard that, it really got me. And I do yoga, and I really know that yoga is so much your teacher saying words. It's how they're walking you through it.
Yeah.
It's verbal, and and when I heard that, I really just loved it. So T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Oh, I talk a lot to myself in English.
I mean, more so, what form is your inner consciousness in?
I hate to be so vague all the time, because I think there's no one answer. It's like it takes all sorts of forms.
Yeah.
Certainly, I sometimes I do battle a lot with my inner dialogue, because it's often very negative, and then I have to dialogue back in other terms, or just not listen to it, or ask it to go watch TV or something. But then there's this really.
I love that.
Then there's another experience that I think is. I'm always in awe of, and it's magical to me, and that's the experience of having an idea. You know, when you're just sitting there doing whatever, sitting in the hot tub. For me, it often takes place in certain places where I'm relaxed, like in the bathtub or on the F train. F train was a great place for me to have ideas when I lived in New York, because you can't do anything but be there, right? And then I would see it, and it takes place as a vision, not as a language, but as a vision. And then, because I'm really a 3D thinker, I can work out all the parts in my head in space.
That's good. You got analog VR. You don't need no.
Yeah.
You don't need
It's in
no
my head already.
speaking computer screen. You just go,
Yeah.
you know, that was really.
You know, the problem with that was always, though, is if I had an idea in the F train, and then I'd be back up in my studio and I'd run into a snag and I couldn't solve the problem, I'd have to go back to the F train to solve the problem.
Well, I experience that on bicycle. I take 3 bike rides a day, and it's just I call it circular thinking. The wheels turning.
Yeah.
Something, and I have to tell you, Abigail Child, the great experimental filmmaker in New York.
Yeah.
I says, "What language is your inner dialogue in?" She goes, "I wish I knew." I love that. It's sort of like what you said. It's like, well, there's many, you know.
It depends on what I'm doing, but she's very talkative. So, and her editing is really fast. Yeah.
So George Manupelli started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago. His mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. Cecil Taylor, great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this just comes through me. So,
Right.
Of course, this question is both and it depends, but is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle or a vessel for whatever culture or technology is dominant?
Personally, I just couldn't give a shit about self-expression, honestly. It's like, I couldn't. It's like, and you know, as an artist, and well, you seem to know this too, Jerry, though I don't know what work you do, is that when I'm making work, there's nothing about the experience of expressing myself in it. It really is like having the idea is just like, whoa, here it comes. And yeah. I remember Tom Waits would say, better write down that song when it comes to you, because maybe he didn't even use the word song, but the idea, because they come along every few minutes and somebody else will grab it. It's like the ideas are just in the ether.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And Tom Waits, he had the humility to say, it's just as it comes along. I also, something that was very influential to me, this was years ago. I think it was after grad school. I read an interview in the Paris Review. I think it was the Paris Review. They had interviews with writers every month. And I can't remember who this was with. It might have been Philip Roth. I'm not sure. But he had the most wonderful relationship with his imagination. And I think artists are very egotistical about who's making what. And writers are more humble about it. And he said that what he did, and this is what I followed ever since, is that he didn't own or run his imagination. The best he could do was be a good host. So what he did, and I'm paraphrasing something I read 35 years ago, is set out the tea and crumpets and invite his imagination to visit. He experienced imagination as a visitation. And this is what I taught my students for years too. So be a good host. Don't be an asshole about it. Like that you can't, because when I demand my imagination to serve me, it's just serving my ego fear. It's not actually serving art. It's just, I just want it to save my face. Yeah, I know. Isn't that a good one? It's like,
that is really good. And you totally, you know, the fun thing is how people like you, when I'm interviewing you, you anticipate the next question, because the next question is, can art making be egoless?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's why we make art.
But see,
that's what drives us.
Right. But you say, sure, 80% of people I ask, and I mean, they're all great people, nice and talented, they will say, no, I can't be that, but the one person a couple of years ago said great art is egoless. But
Yeah, I
they
totally agree.
can't conceive of that because they think, well, there's still some of you in there, or you're driving it, whatever.
That's
But
probably true.
the host idea is
Right.
really, yeah.
That it's still, I'm still the lucky one that gets
Yeah.
visited, but I have to be, the imagination is not personal. That's the main thing in this. It's not personal, and it'll visit anybody else. But if I'm a good host, maybe it'll visit me.
That is great. Is perception reality?
It is to the perceiver.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I love thinking about what is reality, especially in these times. Is like fact and fiction. What is, alternative facts, or what's just plain outright lying,
Yeah.
in this environment. So, but when it comes down to it, this is back to how I think feeling runs everything. Really, it runs everything. And if someone's perception is that they're being attacked, then that's the reality for them.
Yeah.
If we're standing there watching them and they're not being attacked, then which one of those is real, right? Yeah.
Eric McLuhan taught me the funny contradiction is the Latin word to make is factum. So it's the etymology of fact and fake both come from to make.
Great. That's great. That's great.
So tell me one major element of your art, just your general creative process, that's changed since you started, and one major element that stayed the same.
Oh boy, that would bear a little thinking, because so much has changed. Something that's I could say, of course, when I sort of went from sculpture to film, although I was making them simultaneously, and I really think film is a three-dimensional medium. It's not flat pictures. We're moving in space. I think so. There was no conflict with me with doing film and sculpture at the same time. I hesitate to talk about this because it's just so recent, but maybe this is what you're talking about. After making pretty much structuralist films for the last 10 or so years, and sculpture before that, also film before that somewhat, very, very dry, very analytical. Sometimes nothing happens and there's no sound, just like, my best, I guess this was 3 years ago, my best friend, who was Sabina Ott, a sculptor, an artist in Chicago. She was an important artist in Chicago in particular because she was a big community person. She asked me to collaborate on her last show because she knew that she was dying of cancer, and she knew that she wasn't going to be able to accomplish it alone. Now, we were best friends, but we couldn't be more different as artists. Where I might be black and white silent films, she was bright, exuberant, color. She was a big, big personality. And she was a kid. She was like a big kid. Everything was bright and exuberant, I was much more, as I described myself already. And so I said no, because she was a really big personality. I knew she just pushed me around because she'd done it before. But then she started getting sicker, and I realized that I had to say yes. And so I really kind of started doing work in her style, like she would do for this installation. I kind of had some of the motifs that she had in mind, and a couple of the people that she had in mind. And I went to Iceland to film the lava tubes. It's a piece you may have seen on my website called "What Does She See When She Shuts Her Eyes?" Because she used Gertrude Stein in all of her work. And then when I got back from Iceland to report and to find out what else she wanted to do with the show, she had a couple of strokes and then she couldn't tell me. So I really had to complete the show with some of the bare elements that she wanted with the way that I wanted to do it. So it's the show, it doesn't look like either of our works. But some of the things in that just really changed me. It was the interface, I think, the idea of that art could heal trauma in the audience. I did a sort of a it wasn't exactly a panel discussion, but it was a discussion of friendship. And there was such an outpouring of love for her and in the community, and she had such an impact on the community. And I was like now the recipient of all that. But also there was so much, I had to use a lot of color. I had to use goofy elements like flying type that made no sense to me. Wonderful haiku by Stephanie Barber, as a matter of fact. And then all of a sudden I was doing like a much more emotional work, much more colorful work. And it was about her dying. So since then, since COVID, I stopped making films a couple of years ago, and I started designing live performances for songs in which I'm trying to bring the dead back to life with songs. And I'm writing an opera called Sabina and Dana, or Sabina in the afterworld, where she takes me down into the afterworld, like in Dante's Commedia. It tells me where she is. I have another piece where I'm working on a singing CGI mouse that's singing a lament to an extinct song sparrow, and working with the Cornell Ornithology Lab to fabricate this extinct bird's call that we're going to teach to the mockingbirds. Like, of course, during COVID, none of this can happen. But it just, so my work has changed dramatically after doing that project with and then finally for Sabina. And it has much more to do with, it's like all about death, really, but it's all about life. And and I'm not afraid of color. I'm not afraid. I love that songs can make us cry, and I'm jealous of people who make music that people cry at. And I want to make work now that makes people cry. That's really changed.
that it's a beautiful transition. You articulated well. I appreciate it. I wanted to tell you, I asked for 90 minutes and it's about 90. Can you go another 5 or 10?
Sure.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you the next question is, can you forget to die?
Sure. I'm sure you can.
That's
Yeah. Of course, I think, no, let me tell you, Jerry, I think Americans in particular, I think we forget about death all the time. Like, that's the problem. We don't remember that really, I think that's the problem with humans and mostly Americans, is we forget that we're going to die.
wow.
And then we act like there's it's all tomorrows. And meanwhile, that's part of the reason that the climate is collapsing, because we forgot that we're going to die.
Yeah. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
I don't know if this is a strength exactly, but it could be employed as a strength, is that I'm a Cancer and I'm really oversensitive and I take things personally. But the sensitivity part, I think I have learned to cultivate, to be more more compassion rather than, or you could say empathy, I guess. Empathy is kind of dangerous, but that it becomes more compassion. So I've learned tools to find, my boundaries with other people, but I've, tried to maintain the sensitivity without being so affected by it. Yeah.
Really well put. I appreciate your honesty. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Oh, immediately came to mind. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah. Wow.
I have to tell myself all that all the time now.
Yeah. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When things need to be changed.
Yeah. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
And it can't be very good, can it?
Well,
If I don't want it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Well, if I don't want it, I can't imagine something. I can't imagine something good that I wouldn't want. Maybe I don't want to skydive. I don't want an oyster.
Yeah, no, skydiving, it could be good. You don't want it and you never had it. That's fine. Yeah, that was good. How do you find peace of mind?
I find it all the time. It has to do with being present. Meditation helps, but just being right where I am right now.
Yeah.
This is it. And gratitude in that,
Yeah. Good words. I love that. What's the healthiest cultural shift you see developing today?
Moves for diversity. I think it's wonderful to see so many people of color, so many people of not of color, so many people of varying abilities, like just especially in the art world now, really being folded in and really like making new initiatives and so many more voices than there used to be. It's great.
It is great. There's a saying that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into, you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve.
Yeah.
And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. How do you respond to this idea, you create what you resist, or one creates what one resists?
It makes me think of a line that I've never forgotten. It was the title of an article by a couple of classmates of mine, Chris Williams and Steve Prina. And the title of the article was The Construction and Maintenance of Your Enemies. I agree with almost all of the quotes that you had. And I think that that A or not A is still A. Like I'm still stuck in A. It's like I hate A or I want A, but I'm still stuck in A. The anti-A is still A. So I often say it's like, what about F or N? Like just out of that bracket. And I think it's true is that when we're stuck, that's what hate sticks us to the thing we hate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty heavy. You're really articulate, and I appreciated you enlightening me. This has been truly fun, and I just have a couple more. I thank you so much. Joseph Boyce says, make the secrets productive. Lou Welsh said, guard the secrets, constantly reveal them. But it was actually Thornton Wilder in 28. He said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm really grateful. I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
kind of back to the first answer to the first question is in terms of art making, maybe in terms of everything, it's about connection.
Yeah.
It's about finding like that I'm a human among humans, really.
Yeah.
That I recognize myself in other people, and that we connect.
Yeah.
Like that. Right now, that seems to be the what I see is the key to happiness for everybody. Is just that we can connect.
Yeah.
And art's a means for that.
Yeah. What gives you the most optimism?
I guess the amount of energy, and I feel so oppressed by the right and conservatives right now, and then sometimes I'm just surprised to see how much activation, how much activity there is in young people in trying to make the world better. Yeah. Like the Global Climate Conference was disappointing, and then we didn't have any concrete agreements. But the amount of energy of the young people around it, like I don't know, I think that was really inspiring.
The answer I get the most is youth.
Yeah, youth. Yeah.
It is. It's good, and it's inspiring, and it's funny because you really got the whole sense of this time together, because the first question is, what's the best thing for a human being? And my friend who studied Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being.
Yes,
and that's
exactly.
Like connection. And what you said, like connection, or the word you used, which I really loved, was belonging.
Belonging.
I love that word. That was a great word. And then the last question is, sorry, the last question is, they asked Groucho Marx, what gives you the most optimism? And he goes, other people.
Yeah.
And he spent his life cutting down other people, but he needed them,
Yeah. He loved them.
I do want to ask you, just in closing, I liked when you said compassion, and then you said empathy, and then you go, well, and you hesitated about empathy, but I forgot to interject. This guy gave a talk in Ann Arbor a couple of years ago, and he made this big video game. He's a big famous video game guy, and his video game is a mountain just sitting there. It's like, really artsy fartsy, whatever. It's not like a normal video game. And he gave a nice lecture, and he says, it's not about storytelling. Fuck storytelling. It's all about empathy. No. And I like that. But how were you differentiating between empathy and compassion?
I guess I'm just a little cautious about empathy, because it can be so, like, boundary crossing, as they say, is like feeling other people's feelings, I think, can be problematic.
Yeah.
Because they're not mine.
Yeah.
But compassion means I can understand them, I guess. I'm just cautious about empathy,
No, it's very
how
interesting.
I use it.
Yeah. It's really, what you just said is interesting, because, what we study is words. That's what that's my main thing, is how we the etymology of words, and then how we change words. And I know we're going to end now, but I want to continue our discussion, and just have a casual talk where it's not live on YouTube, and talk more about all our similarities in people we know, and, just a general conversation. Because one thing is, I attend the Dante's reading club every week.
Wow.
And it's based in Dublin. And I mean, when I read that you were studying Dante, I was like, wow.
Wow.
And then, I mean, it's really amazing, because they read it in Italian, and then we read it in English.
Oh, man.
It's every Wednesday at 11 a.m. and it is just so fun. And then every Monday night we have a Carl Jung reading club.
Wow.
And I mean, these are things that we could cross over. And, one of my, I don't know if you knew him, but one of my best friends who I made films with, and I still do, is Mark X. Farina, who ran the media.
I know him well.
I know. I figured you know
So
Mark.
well. We worked together for years at Otis. He was my student, and then and he also ran the video cage.
He still does.
He still does.
Yeah.
He was in the public practice program, and so I don't know, many years we were.
Yeah.
So because I was teaching film and video, and we interfaced all the time.
I know. It was really amazing when I started reading all the crossover. But
yeah.
anyways, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Delight.
Really
And
fun.
We'll be in touch.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thanks,
adios.
dear.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.